Thank you so much for joining us today. Our panel is on relocation to Victoria, and as you join, I'm going to ask you guys to use the chat functionality. Let us know where you are joining in from, and make sure that when you go to type in the chat, in the to bar, make sure you select to all panelists and attendees so everybody can see where you're tuning in from. So the question is, where are you today? Calgary, awesome. Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary. Ooh, LA, awesome. So as everybody joins, again, we're just asking, share with all panelists and attendees using your chat function, where are you tuning in from today? I will get us kicked off here promptly because half an hour is going to fly by. So thanks again for joining us on this panel on relocation. My name is Lindsay Richmond. I'm the Director of Leadership and Learning from VIATEC, and I'm a recent transplant to the island myself. I moved in 2019. I'm joined by 3 members of our community who also have experience or expertise in the area of relocation. I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment here. So I love that you're all sharing where you're from. When I last checked our participant data for the job fair, 82% of the candidates joining are located in Canada, but 68% are outside of the Greater Victoria region. So sounds like a lot of you are in the right place here. We're going to answer some of your questions in the next 30 minutes about relocation. We're going to share some stories, resources, and experiences for anyone considering the move to paradise. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it is very lovely here. And speaking of how lovely it is here, I really want to begin with a territorial acknowledgement to express how grateful I am to live, work, and play on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen people. So I acknowledge with respect these people, their rich cultural heritage with the land, and that heritage continues to this day. It's a real privilege to be here. With that, I would love to give our panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about why they're here today. We're going to start with Emily, then go to Darcie, then Veronica. Take it away.
Hi, my name is Emily Hannon. I'm here because I started the website movingtovictoria.com. I relocated to Victoria 2014 up from Seattle. So my mom is the Canadian one. So I moved up from Victoria, from Seattle. And I'm here because I feel very passionately that while moving to the island is something that is very, very rewarding, is something that is entirely different from the rest of Canada and the US.
Hi, everybody. My name is Darcie Gabruck, and so I have been an employment counselor for the past 20 years. I currently work at the Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria, where we provide a wide range of services for newcomers to Canada and to Victoria. And so my transition history has been coming over from the mainland in Vancouver in 2015. I moved to the island, moved to Victoria in 2018. And yes, as Emily said, it is a city in and of itself, and it's a beautiful place to live. So look forward to speaking with you more.
Thanks, Darcie, and take it away, Veronica.
Hi there, I'm Veronica Best. I'm the Director of Product at Dyspatch. It's a Victoria-based startup, and I've relocated a few times in my life professionally. I grew up out east, but I moved to Victoria 2.5 years ago from Berlin, to which I'd relocated from Vancouver, BC, where I lived for quite a few years. And I'm here to tell you about little things to look for, how to talk to employers, how to find a job, and what I wish I'd known before I relocated the first 2 times, and I've learned along the way. So I'm really happy to be here.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Veronica. And just to give everyone who's tuning in a sense of the flow today, we're going to start with Veronica. She's going to tell us a little bit about her experience, do some storytelling around what her mindset was at the time, what she learned along the way. And then we're going to get Emily and Darcie to share a little bit about what they've learned in their similar experiences and in their works, and share some resources with you. Now, you'll see, and I think we're all familiar with Zoom by now, but there's a little Q&A button in the bottom middle of your screen. feel free to type in questions. We're going to make sure everybody gets a chance to share their key points, but we really want to make sure that we're targeting the areas that are going to add the most value to the 35 of you here today. So use that. I'll be moderating. I'll be checking the chat for questions and the Q&A. And let's, have fun, be interactive. So Veronica, tell us the tale of your move to Victoria.
So my story in Victoria actually begins in university. I did my undergrad and my master's in Victoria after growing up out east, and then moved to Vancouver, looked for a job, got a job, and after, I don't know, almost a decade there, I moved to Germany. And one of the things that I wish I'd known, like everybody jokes about paperwork and kind of like bureaucracy when you're moving, especially to Europe. And I wish I'd not been so keen to underestimate how much work that was going to be and how much work it is to get like insurance and healthcare and all those things set up. So that's definitely something I mentioned to people. If you're moving within Canada, it's less of an issue, although health in BC is a little bit different than other provinces. I worked for a startup in Berlin called SoundCloud, a music streaming service. Loved that, and then moved back to Canada 2.5 years ago. And a couple of things I wanted to share that I think are really helpful are, one, when I moved to Victoria, one of my big fears was I really wanted to work at Dyspatch, this awesome startup, but what if it didn't work out? Like, when you're interviewing, you get one glimpse of a company. What if it turns out to be not what you expect? So I did a lot of work. This is something I learned when I moved abroad to Berlin, but I did a lot of work to figure out, like, are there other companies here that might be willing to hire me? What are the salaries like at other companies? What other, potential roles could I have that are adjacent to my role if the company that's relocating me doesn't turn out to be what I expected it to be? So that's definitely one thing to think about, is like, what's your plan B and plan C and plan D, especially if you move somewhere, you don't want to move back to where you came from if the job doesn't work out. So once you've chosen the city, stick around and then just have a backup plan so that if it doesn't work out, you don't feel like you have to stay in a job that you don't like. And then the second thing that has really changed the way that I approach job hunting is make sure that you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you, if not more. And this is ask questions about how many people have moved from other places here and been established. What kind of activities are there to get to know your coworkers? What's the policy around, like, parental leave and sick days and overtime work, and whatever things are important to you, make sure that you're asking those questions when you're interviewing. When I interviewed at Dyspatch, my current company, I was so impressed with their interview process, with the whole hiring process. And it occurred to me that, like, that's the only thing that I had to judge the company by, was how they recruited me. So if the company you're interviewing with, if they seem kind of dodgy, like, trust your gut, because that's all you have to judge them by. And I think this is true whether you're relocating or not, but in this particular context, like, you have a lot riding on the move. So definitely do your due diligence ahead of time. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions in the chat, and then I'll hand it back to you, Lindsay.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Veronica. So it's funny you say that. I did have the experience of moving to Victoria, and immediately the job that I was hired for, relocated out here, moved my partner, that job didn't work out for me. And so I did live that firsthand. And I will say it does take, like, if you're thinking of making a move, you need some grit and resilience, and you need to really know why you want to be in that place. Emily, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
That actually happened to me. The job I moved for, I did not vet completely. I very much did know why I wanted to live in Victoria. I had a cousin there and loved Victoria. But yeah, after the first month, I thought, uh-oh, this is not good. But I will say, it took a lot of work and effort to land that first job in Victoria. But if something happens, once you are in Victoria, most of your work is done for you. So it was actually much easier to get that second job. And the employers that I was interviewing with were very understanding, and I've heard this many times, that someone who relocates to Victoria, they're in that first job and they're like, oh, this wasn't the right fit. So I thought it would be very difficult to explain myself. It ended up being a non-issue at all. So it was actually a much easier experience than I had feared.
Yeah, I would agree with that exactly. And I find the Victoria community, it's not a surprise to them, like you said. And I will say we're like a small, big city, and there seems to be a real willingness to help. And people are willing to connect you to other people. And so that was my experience finding my second job. My partner now, he's actually attending the job fair today. He's looking for his second job. But it's still a beautiful place to live. And Darcie, I'll throw it over to you and let you add your 2 cents here and share from your experience.
Yeah, and absolutely. I will say Victoria is, see, I did it too. Victoria is its own city separate from Vancouver, but a lot of people who come over from Victoria think it's going to be the same. The big difference is networking. Victoria is a government city, and so many people want to work for the government. There is an art in and of itself of how to get a job working with the BC Public Service. However, to reference back to what Veronica was saying about the need for the Plan A and the Plan B, it really is all about networking. Networking you can do before you even come to Victoria, so that, yeah, if things don't turn out as you expected when you first arrived, that you'll already have planted the seeds for that second job or otherwise, or the difference between how to take that first job, transition it into what your long-term goal might be. I really can't stress enough the importance of networking and really knowing who's in business here. Don't discount some of the smaller businesses. Again, like many people want to work for the government. Yes, they're a big employer, but there are many other employers in Victoria as well. And so do focus on that. And the way that you'll find your fit is through networking. So absolutely open those doors. And people are willing to help. A lot of people are scared of, oh, why would an employer want to talk to me or, give me information? But, people are happy to help, right? It can be scary, but it's a skill. Learn to network and use the resources like we have available, all of us meeting today.
Yeah, Darcie, I would completely agree with that. And actually, my partner got his job through a cold call to a company. And he ended up being the producer at Czech News through a cold call. So you never know where those jobs are coming from. And the network, I feel, is really willing to help. One of my first experiences with the city was actually attending the VIATEC Awards. I had just been here for a month, attended that, got to meet so many people, realized there's a real pulse in Victoria and a real community feeling. So I would also highly recommend, when we're back into the world that we know, attending a lot of events in the community. You'll start to see the same faces. I do have a question here for Veronica. Oh, did you answer it, Veronica?
I typed it out, but I can quickly speak to this if you like.
Yeah.
I think it's a great question.
Repeat the question and just share your answer here.
Sure. So the question is, what detailed questions, do we ask detailed questions after getting the offer or during the interview? Different advice will, I think there's no wrong answer to this. My approach is to always ask before you get to the offer stage, because I don't like to waste anybody's time in the interview process. Like, if I get answers and I know it's not a fit, then I just don't proceed with the interview and I don't get to the offer stage. I can just withdraw. And I like to know those things because it helps me understand whether I even want an offer. And when you're discussing an offer, if you know, for example, that the policy is only 2 weeks vacation, you want 3, by the time you get to the offer stage, you can actually start to negotiate early before you even get the offer and say, like, for me, 3 weeks vacation is really important. Is there anything you could do? And then that way the offer looks the way you want it. I gave a couple of examples of questions that I asked during the interview process too. And some of these felt scary to ask initially, but I've learned that it's so worth it to ask. So things like, how many women do you have on your leadership team or on the engineering team or in general? What's the policy around parental leave? Like, I don't have kids, but I want to work in a place that supports parents and supports people who have to take care of, elderly family members who have other commitments in their lives, things like that. But I think asking before the offer stage gives you a lot of leverage when you get to the offer stage. Yeah. Darcie, you probably have good advice here as well. You're like an actual career counselor.
Sorry, I'm multitasking, answering questions on the side and participating.
Yeah, Darcie, so the question was around when to ask those detailed questions about corporate culture, policies. Is that after the offer or before?
Oh, absolutely before. I think the more you find out before you're accepting any kind of offer, I would say even before you're looking for a job, start networking, research who the company is, what they do. At the interview, ask follow-up questions, and then at the time of the offer, continue to find out. Because I can't stress enough the importance of finding the right fit for you. A lot of people, we think I just need a job, but you want a good job. You want a job that's going to be satisfying for you. So absolutely, at any and all points.
And Darcie, there was another question for you. I saw you answered briefly here, but I think it's a great question that a lot of people have. So I'm based in Ontario. During this time with COVID-19, is there a chance to work remotely and then start the moving process? So in other words, could you be hired by a Victoria company, work remotely, and then come over? And what were your thoughts on that one, Darcie?
I would say absolutely. So, I mean, it would depend entirely on the employers. I have seen postings where there are opportunities, and increasingly as you know, the COVID pandemic goes on, to start working remotely. However, the reality will be that sometimes that can change at fairly short notice too. And so you may need to be prepared to move on fairly short notice. Yeah, reach out to employers. Possibilities are out there.
Perfect. And I see we have a question here about stats available, stats on the employers available. You can always see who's hiring on the VIATEC job board in the tech community. There are other websites, and actually, Cheryl, we are doing a, so VIATEC in partnership sometimes with other hubs does do a wage survey and study. So results for the new one, results for the latest, I'll have to find out. I think they're available to our VIATEC members, and we are doing another one for the upcoming year. It's a big part of what we do as a not-for-profit, making sure that Victoria is a competitive city. And then there was one more question here, and Emily, you might be a good person to answer, but it appears Victoria is a destination community opposed to a transient community for tech workers. Is this a correct assessment?
I think to clarify, what they're saying is a destination community, meaning people come and they stay here in tech. I think that's what you're saying. If that's true, that is true. I would say that if you have worked in other bigger cities, like I have and others have, Berlin would be a good example, San Francisco, maybe Toronto. Victoria is a place that people come to settle. Not necessarily kids, family, but they're here to stay. So it is a different mindset, and it's one that I definitely encountered in interviews. People are very interested to know what else is bringing you to Victoria other than a job. So keep in mind that often you'll be asked, what are your hobbies? Do you have any family? Is a very important question for Victoria employers. What they're really asking is, will you be here in the long term?
And Darcie, I see you nodding your head. We want to add to what Emily said.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Employers are looking for commitment, because if they're going to be making any kind of commitment to you, they're expecting the same in return. And so, yeah, if there is any investment in training, I know a few people in the chat have been asking about wage subsidies. That will be a huge part of any wage subsidy, which might potentially be happening too. And so in exchange for that, they want to know you're staying. So, and the chance to grow with a company can come through that, right?
Yeah. And I don't know how many folks on this event are aware, but tech is actually Victoria's largest industry. So tech, government, and tourism are our biggest economic drivers here, and people do come to stay. Our tech industry is growing. We're looking to bring that permanent talent here, and we do see a lot of that talent going, for example, to Vancouver, and sometimes they're coming back, but sometimes not. So we have a lot of early stage talent in tech, and there's always a demand for experienced talent in tech here, because we tend to see a bit of a drain to larger cities. Just see if there are any other questions. Veronica, do you have anything to add to the conversation in the meantime?
I'll add a couple small notes that I've observed, and this is like one data point from me, the one person, but I noticed that employee retention is really high for companies in Victoria, way more so than cities like Vancouver. I think that's because there are fewer companies here, but also because the companies in Victoria are very committed to employee retention and to keeping talent and growing talent. So hiring juniors as well as senior folks to help grow a career, really talking about your career path early on with you. I think this is pretty I would say like common, if not like systemic within Victoria. And it's such a good thing for employees. It really gives us the advantage because moving jobs is stressful for everyone. It costs a lot of money to recruit people, obviously for companies, but it means that you build a community within your company. So I would say people come in and like stick around. And also moving to Victoria, like people move to Victoria because they want to be in Victoria, not as often for the job as say moving in Vancouver within Vancouver. And that means that they're committed to staying as well, just to add to what Emily was saying, which is absolutely true.
Yeah. We do just have, 7 minutes left, and I want to make sure, and we've been having a lot of great questions coming in. We'll save these questions and we'll get back to you guys about the questions as possible. I want to make sure that we have a chance to cover some of the resources available. So Emily and Darcie in particular, maybe I'll just give you 3 minutes each to sort of talk about your organization and what's offered through it so people know where to look after this call. Darcie, we'll start with you.
Okay, for sure. So I work with the Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria. And so we offer a wide range of services to newcomers. And so everything from settlement, so help with like things from housing to connecting to schools, healthcare, some of the government forms, any and all things related to getting settled in Victoria. For newcomers, most of our services do, however, require that you have your PR, so permanent resident. However, there are a few additional services available for those who don't. In addition to settlement, we of course offer employment supports. And so there are a wide variety of employment programs available, including the Career Paths program, which is the program that I'm part of. We work with professionals trained in both regulated and unregulated occupations and can help in your job search with everything from networking to job search, mentorship, all that kind of things as well. We also offer language classes. We have youth services. So it's really meant to be a catch-all for newcomers, a wide range of services. So for anybody who's contemplating moving to Victoria, do drop by our office. We'd love to be able to help you.
Perfect. Thank you, Darcie. And maybe while Emily speaks, Darcie, would you mind just typing your website in the chat there?
Sure.
And Emily, take it away.
So I'm behind the website movingtovictoria.com. My experience moving to Victoria was a little bit different. I'm like many Canadians. I have two parents. One is American, one is Canadian. And so there wasn't a guide to kind of the practical things that are very unique to Victoria that are not the same as anywhere else in Canada or the US. So the website is a conglomerate of resources like where Darcie's from, more on the practical side of how to move to Victoria. The one thing that I will say about moving to Victoria is it can be a slightly lonely experience. The three big things, housing, childcare, and jobs. A lot of people who move to Victoria say it's unusually, it's something that you have to do on your own. So jobs, recruiters are not as much of a thing in Victoria as they are in Vancouver or Toronto. You have to look for jobs yourself. Childcare is the same. So a lot of dedicated hunting and housing. We don't use, if you use the term estate agents or like in Vancouver, there are companies that you contact that will find listings for you. So the reason I have the website is for all those groups that only locals know. So a lot of ways to get housing and jobs are Facebook groups, oddly. So keep the Facebook. That's the only reason I still have Facebook. And things like, here are all the companies that you need to look for. Or one thing that shocked me was you definitely need to have your printout of your driving history from the state or the province that you moved for. You need a printout. No, you can't get it emailed. No, your mother can't get it. I tried. I had to drive back. My friend had to fly back to Ontario for it. So it's kind of a guide, all the things you need to get before you move, or it's expensive to go back for. So yeah. Also, weirdly, Kijiji is not a thing in Victoria. We just do not use it. It's used everywhere else.
Used Victoria.
We use Victoria.
Yeah.
Like, it's odd.
Yeah. We have a couple more minutes. Veronica, I wanted to give you an opportunity to chime in our closing remarks too, as well.
I have a quick addition that I don't think was mentioned, and that's there's some pretty good organizations locally for tech by people in tech in Victoria and just open to the public. So 2 Slack channels that come to mind that were hugely helpful for me initially are YYJ Tech. And then there's the YYJ Tech for women specifically called YYJ Tech Ladies. If you have questions about what a job is really like, what a company is like, you'll find somebody who'll give you a really honest and transparent answer. I think people in Victoria are very open about what things are like, pros and cons. And those 2 Slack channels are an incredible resource if you're even just wondering, like, some of the questions we had in the chat would have done really well in the Slack channel as well. So don't feel like after this particular panel is over that that's the end of the advice. Like, those 2 Slack channels will help a lot. So I did want to mention those two resources. Ditto with the Facebook group. So especially for everything, finding a place to live, you know, finding a couch, like those kinds of things, super helpful.
That's perfect.
Also, Reddit Victoria is one of those that's really helpful for advice from people who have very recently relocated to Victoria.
What was that again, Emily?
Reddit,
Oh, yeah.
R Victoria.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we just have 1 more minute. I want to take this time to thank the panelists today. You'll be able to ask more of these types of questions if you go to the VIATEC career booth. We've got some team members there. You know where to find the resources that Emily and Darcie offer. Slack channels, I would completely agree with, as well as LinkedIn, connecting with people that you're interested to meet. A lot of people will give you the time for an information interview. If you see a job that you're interested in, I saw a couple questions here, and you want to know specifically about what they're looking for on your resume, you can try connecting and calling the hiring manager. You can try connecting the HR person there. There's a lot of interest right now, and the world has opened up for remote work. So it's really on you, like Emily said, to be creative and drive that process. That's about it. Please stick around. If there's employers that you're interested in speaking to, you can find them at the career fair, and they would also be happy to ask a lot of your specific questions about finding a job in Victoria with them. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Bye, thank you.